Like I've said before, I don't script these videos. It's just me sitting here thinking out loud. I think everything built before the 1800s and even up to the 1900s is pre-Columbus, pre our story, pre our history. However, when I was showing the fort in Pakistan with its beautiful cylinders, I was saying we're not going to find anything like this in America, even if it was in America. What we'll see in America is what fits into the American history. The Greco-Roman or classical architecture has been left. Narratives have been attached to it, ridiculous narratives. As we've explored over the years, these could be explained away. But anything else like a pyramid or those towers in Pakistan would not have a place in the American narrative and will have been destroyed or covered up long ago, long before we began this research. Because America is the richest nation in the world. They can do such things, but in Pakistan they can't. They don't have the resources and they don't even care. Everything fits into their narrative, similar to India. Nothing shocking in India. So today I'm not going to focus on ruins in North America. Instead, we will look at something else. Absolutely fascinating, in my opinion, and I thank you for being here. Welcome, and God bless. I think this is a courthouse in Seattle, maybe Tacoma. And if anybody thinks that a horse and buggy people build a courthouse like this, right across the street from these shacks, well, I don't know. Look at this thing. Here's what most of the photos look like from the Civil War. The biggest photo op in American history, before the cell phone. I mean, just posing all over the place with a hand in the pocket, like they're on vacation. You don't pose when you're faced with adversity. I don't even like to pose for any reason. And this is in Mexico. And this is somewhere. Who cares? Every city has a building like this. I was in my early 20s when I first went into a building like this. It was the Salt Lake City Courthouse. I had to go in there to get a business license to have a food cart on the sidewalk. I was to sell crepes and eventually coffee from this food cart. And I walked into this monstrosity. And the Salt Lake one is even bigger than this one. And I thought, what the hell is this? The department I was looking for was just stuffed in a little corner of the building. Made absolutely no sense. Most of it was in disuse. Looked like I was in a museum. In the basement, just like here, just as we see shown in this photograph, in the basement, there was a restaurant. Everything about everything was stupid, and I was both in awe and confused. I knew something was wrong. And even to this day, 90% of the building not being used, most of these. 95% of the palace in Bucharest not being used. And I get a lot of comments telling me they insist it was built in the 60s. 90% not being used. Millions of dollars per month just to heat and cool the place. For nothing. And this looks like a really rough go for these people who have clearly been enslaved. Unbelievable. And it looks like the remains of a building. Everything just so square down here. And I think there's precious things that they're carting out of here. I don't know. We often look at the architecture, but what is more fascinating is what lies underground, oftentimes several floors. And if most of the above-ground building is not being used, how strange to have over 150-year-old buildings with massive 1- and 2-story basements. And what we find is they are complete with plumbing. Even in old Rome, they had pipes and plumbing. And yet in the 1800s, America is supposed to have outhouses. But the truth is, this is in my small town in the middle of nowhere, Utah. This was behind my coffee shop, and my plumbing failed. And upon excavating, I came to find that there were these terracotta or brick pipes with a glazing on the inside. And what I had come to discover running this coffee shop in this small Utah town is that all the sewers were failing. Exactly what happened 100 years ago in the big cities. But it was much later. The towns were so small. It wasn't until they grew in these rural areas that all these old pipes and infrastructure would begin failing, just as they had in larger cities 100 years ago. This is a statue that we're told was carved in Italy in a museum in a very early time period, chiseling away. And I've made several videos discussing this, but I still believe that this is 3D printed, and you can put anything in a 3D printer. Any mixture. You can use mud, concrete, geopolymer, or even plastics, as are more common today. This to me is proof. All these sculptures that are so realistic that nobody can replicate today. The expression, the tenderness. Here again, just a depiction of what this whole realm seems to be. All the buildings we see, that we call Tartarian for lack of a better term, have buried levels. Here is the Ritz-Carlton in California, and right on the edge of their golf course, we discovered ruins. Shortly after I made this video, they demolished several of these columns. Very disheartening to share things that quickly become demolished soon thereafter. Still a few pillars remain, and clearly there's access unless they've concreted over this, and they've done a number on these coastlines. One of my favorite topics to share when we just explore the artificiality of all the coastlines, clearly shaped and rocked, and little parts poking out all over the place. This is a picture behind my coffee shop a few years ago. It was just starting to snow a little bit on this day. And to me, this is such a beautiful depiction of what happened in our recent history. We can see the older brick, and we can remark how it's buckled and cracking, and the tops on all the buildings in this town have been knocked off. I mean, by time or the cataclysm, and they've redone the tops, cleaning them up. So the newer stuff is on the top. Here they've just roughly cut a hole in the brick. Just the worst job putting a door in. And here's a look at the brick on the inside. This looks really hasty. A very crude job here. And back to these buildings that are found everywhere. When I first started doing this research, I said, okay, how about Africa? Oh yes, this is the Macmillan Library in Nairobi, Kenya, 1936. And there's thousands. It really gets remarkable when we get down to New Zealand. And I don't know why something is clear, why some people can just seem out of place, having nothing to do with their surroundings. And here we understand that electricity can be gathered from the atmosphere. Here this is titled An Apparatus for Collecting Atmospheric Electricity, June 26, 1907. And I've stated before that I think everybody was just reverse engineering all the tech that was being discovered everywhere. What they tell us is lightning antennas, the excessive amount of lightning antennas. You could never pay me to put a lightning antenna on my building. No, I'll put it 100 feet away. I'm going to attract lightning. But this, on the other hand, to gather the electricity that already exists constantly, this makes so much more sense. And every building just having some excessive either lightning rod or flagpole, even the ordinary buildings. And why discuss the melted building idea? I don't know, why discuss anything? If this is not a mountain that has been carved upon by Native Americans with tools that shouldn't be able to carve into mountains, then what is it? And if it looks like a melted building, just the faintest husk, true blessing that we can see any of it, then that should matter. It should matter because if it's true, then we've been lied to about it. We've been told that this is the result of millions and millions of years, when really it could have happened in a flash. And I believe it did. but this is an old Cataclysm, one of the older ones. We clearly have this type of architecture built on top of older architecture, such as seen at the temple in Cholula. And I think these are more than just ornamental. These are access points to the underrealm that connect everything. This realm is built intelligently from the ground up, beginning with the canals, as far as we can see, really beginning with the pumps and the generating of continuity throughout the realm. And these buildings simply being hubs. Again, 100 years ago, people had outhouses. And structures like this are littered across the plain. Littered. And we treat them like litter. Tear them down. Even the historical societies, as I've mentioned before, are so late to step in. It's the excess that really does it for me. In a time before proper plumbing and elevators and cranes, why are you building up? And if we're building outhouses, then they should be just as beautiful as these. I've never once seen an ornamental outhouse. Pretty important. More important than the top half of this building. And all the major institutions have stepped in and placed their stamp on the greatest of these buildings, including this castle here that the Smithsonian snatched up. And of course all the government and municipality buildings, hospitals, banks, just designating everything. This building can be seen in the oldest photographs of Washington, D.C. And again, the man is going to have to stroll out of this tower and go find an outhouse somewhere just to relieve himself. Does this make any sense? No, somebody built it all. Somebody absolutely built all of this. Sometimes there's no history at all. And when we find it everywhere, when we actually begin to research all the old architecture, we find a full landscape, all resembling the same hand and just way over the top. There are so many levels to discuss here. Just excavating with a horse and buggy and then lifting all this material to hundreds of feet, again with no more than horse as your power. And all the construction photos look like they're just removing dirt, struggling just to do that. And it's everywhere. Every part of the world in ruins, mud everywhere, rubble, and then a very confused and primitive looking people. And fast forward 50 years and they would simply clean everything up. In this next segment, we're going to look at something a little more recent. It seems they're still writing these comical narratives. I don't know what to make of this building or this picture, which is a building. I don't know. It looks like a dream. It's like one of those fake Tartaria pictures, like an artwork floating in the sky or something. And I love those pictures, but I also don't. I think they kind of muddy the waters and make me second guess myself. So beautiful. And I thought, where could this be? Is this even real? After doing a reverse image search, it turns out it's the Swami Narayan Temple. And upon doing this research, it originally started with older stuff, 100 plus years ago, and then got closer and closer, to where even in the community, certain sites, like the palace in Bucharest, which was said to be built in the 70s, became topics of debate. And I didn't think they could continue to pull this off up until the 70s, but I now believe so. Do believe that these things were still going on in the 70s, shuffling and repurposing the old world. But today, this is really pushing it. So much so to where I'm going to begin by saying, I don't know. This is just crazy. Here we're told this mind-blowing temple here was actually completed in 2005. And it's a first for me. It's a first for me seeing this wonder that upon first glancing at, I wasn't even sure if it was real. And then I was very excited to see that it was real. I find it to be more impressive than the so famous Taj Mahal. And upon doing a little research, I come to discover that it was built in 5 years, from 2005. The 5-year temple. The long-named temple is a Hindu temple and a spiritual campus in Delhi, India. It's also referred to as the Akshardham temple, and this is the name that originally was associated with it when I started looking into it. Ham, like one of the sons of Noah, Ham. The complex displays a millennia of traditional and modern culture. Inspired by this yogi doesn't give a shit about a temple, first of all. And created by this Swami. I don't think this Swami looks like the creator. It was constructed by BAPS, a Hindu denomination formed in 1905. It's no different than the Catholic Church for me, or any great religion. Until poverty and human suffering has been solved, it's disgusting to build things like this. Piss billions into structures like this. If it's true, and I don't think it's true. Only in the old world were they pumping out structures like this. However, 2005 is so recent, we must have hundreds of construction photos. And again, I don't know. I look forward to seeing them if they exist. And I have searched, but that doesn't mean they don't exist yet. So whatever, they tell us all the tourist attractions about this site. Whatever, I don't care. More features, musicians, dancers, worthless. Exhibits, like it's some kind of World's Fair in India. Maybe they're pulling the World's Fair in India now, telling the new young Indians, look at this new temple that we've built. Here are exhibits, just like the World's Fair. Ooh, let's walk around this monstrosity and learn nothing about the architecture, but rather whatever they want to indoctrinate the people about in these booths and exhibits, just like the World's Fair. Could it be that they're pulling an Indian World's Fair right here, right now, or at least in 2005, with this structure? Was this really built in 5 fucking years? Sorry, 5 years. Okay, let's get past the exhibits. If we could have something serious here, besides the theater and the boat ride, the musical fountain, an absolute joke. This is a perfect joke. Look at this. Closed due to the sea. The Akshardham complex. Planning. Here we go. Something serious. The building had been planned since 1968 as a vision of this yogi. He was not a very modest yogi. He was the spiritual head of this denomination. Attempts were made to start the project, however, little progress was made. In 1971, he died. Okay, that should just be the end of it. Sorry, no temple. But no, this guy, in 1982, the successor to this guy, took them 11 years to find this guy, started to continue fulfilling the dream of his guru. He had nothing else to do. He prompted devotees to look into the possibility of building the temple in Delhi. And here's where it starts to just sound like the World's Fair. A request for the plan was put forward to the Delhi Development Authority. So this guy reaches out to the Delhi Department Authority to request a plan. He doesn't even have a plan. He's just going off of this guy's dream. And he reaches out to the government. Hey government, my old master had a dream. Can you help me? Okay, let us suggest a few different places. How about this one, or this one? But this guy says, oh no, my old master really wanted it to be in this city here of Yamuna. So 20 years pass. 20 years pass. This started to go down in 1982. He reaches out to the government. Says, hey, can you help me with a plan? They offer him some land. And he says, no, gotta be here. So 20 years later, okay, 18 years later, the Delhi Authority offered 60 acres of land. You see how this is sounding World's Fair now? 60 acres? We were just going to build a temple. And another state in India, unrelated, offered 30 acres for the project. Just rolling out the red carpet for this guy's wish to fulfill his master's wish. Just the government just doling out all this land without a plan. The guy had to request a plan. They don't even have a plan. No, 20 years later, 60 plus another 30 acres, and that's it. This guy was ready to perform a puja on the site for success of the project. There we go. He's going to go dump some water out. This is his plan. Construction on the temple began in 2000. That's it. They gave the land, he dumps the water, and they begin construction in 2000. And Akshardham was officially opened in 2005. 5 years. So here we go. Here we have a construction photo. Really, really reminiscent of our old narrative, just made in recent times. And again, I'm completely open. I'm excited to see the hundreds of construction photos that we must have for this temple, this fairy tale temple. So, a team of 8 swamis were assigned to oversee the project. During the development, this guy was consulted in many aspects of the monument's construction. Around 97 and 98, very vague, the idea to start development on the temple by beginning the stone carving had been requested. However, this guy asserted that the construction should only start after the land was acquired. Oh, that's a good idea. The initial work done on the site was on the foundation. Initially, the site wasn't considered ideal for the construction. As a result, a deep foundation was imperative. So they're having issues with the soil, similar to many of the old stories. They tell us they started these old constructions on swamps, oftentimes. 5 million fired bricks raised the foundation another 21 feet. And that's on top of the 15 feet of rocks and sand, intertwined with mesh and topped by 5 feet of concrete. The bricks were then topped by 3 more feet of concrete to form the main support under the monument. Okay, well that's interesting. July 2001, the first sculpted stone was laid. The Swamis watched over stonework as well as the research on carvings. It's like they're figuring it out as they go. The research was done at various sites, such as Angkor Wat and other temples. 7,000 carvers and 3,000 volunteers were put to work for the construction of this place. 7,000. So this is a good study in a lot of different ways. And again, I'm just not sure if it's even true. 7,000 workers. So reminiscent of our old stories. Just one person here. 6,999 people were off on this day. While the detailed carvings were done by hand, initial stone cutting was done by machine. Every night, over 100 trucks were sent, where 4,000 workers and volunteers operated on the construction site. Every night, 100 trucks with 4,000 workers. That's a lot of people in these 100 trucks. So that's it. We're just trucking people in 100 trucks, thousands of people and volunteers. And then we move on to the opening ceremony. Akshardham was consecrated. I love this one. Similar to founded in 2005 by this fine man. Go man, pursuing the dream of a dream. This is your man. Nothing is impossible for this man. The opening ceremony with the presence of 25,000 guests. Again, similar to these old narratives. A place of education, experience, and enlightenment. Education, like I showed up here. Musical fountain, gardens, boat ride, theater, exhibits, and it just doesn't add up. Oh my god, an official Guinness Book of World Records was given to this man, the spiritual leader. The record was presented as the world's largest comprehensive Hindu temple certificate. The certificate states that this temple is the world's largest Hindu temple, covering an area of 86,000 square feet. In comparison, the palace in Bucharest was 1,000,000 square feet. To this day, they only occupy, I believe, 10 to 20% of it. So I don't know. Is this something that was recently built? In 5 years, I'm gonna reach out to all the experts in the field on this one. Could it be done? So again, I don't know. Let me know your thoughts. This was a weird one. For today, I thank you for being here. Do have a blessed day. I love you all, and I'll see you next week.